Hi everyone, I'm Ashwin Sanghi and today I'm going to take you through what I consider to be 10 very important tips for writing commercial bestsellers, particularly in the world of fiction. My very first tip for you, don't write. What do I mean? Well, don't think of it as writing. Think of it as storytelling. Think that you are sitting with a bunch of friends in a group and you want that none of them should get up midway before you've actually completed telling the story. Ultimately, remember, you can either tell a good story or you can't. No fancy words can actually substitute for a good story. Write about what excites you, not because something is selling well or because it is fashionable. When I started out with the Rosabal line, there was no genre called theological thriller in India. Remember, there are no dull subjects. There are only dull writers. My second tip for you, be inspired but stay original. There is frankly no harm in looking at the construct of an existing book and being inspired by it. If you read a book called The Seven Basic Plots by Christopher Booker, you will find that actually all stories fit into one of 7 basic plots. But is every sandwich the same? What you put between those two slices of bread is what determines the originality of that sandwich. Maintain an idea bank for yourself. Remember that our best ideas come to us when we have no intention of writing a book. Samuel Johnson said that the two most engaging powers of an author are to make new things familiar and familiar things new. Remember that the same Johnson, of course, in the same breath, said to a young and upcoming writer that his manuscript was good and original, but the part that was good wasn't original, and the part that was original wasn't good. So try and be both, good as well as original. My third tip, learn to lie. The best qualification for a storyteller is to be a bloody good liar. But if you plan to tell a lie, then tell the lie as close to the truth as possible, because it makes the lie that much more believable. So in that sense, research is key to being a bloody good liar. Invest time in getting your facts right so that you may get your fiction right. For example, I know that 2 tiny punctures in the neck will drain 15% of a human's blood in 6 minutes and 24 seconds. Why do I know this? Research for some of the thrillers that written. So research is of many types. My Bharat series involved traveling, somewhere reading, somewhere interviews. Maintain a research bank, stay organized so that you can easily access your research while you are plotting or writing. But remember one thing, maintain a balance between your research and story. When you do lots of research, there is an overwhelming desire to bring it all into the book. Unfortunately, maintaining a balance is very, very difficult. So my fourth tip for you is to plan, prepare, and plot. Plan your project. Think of it as a roadmap. If you had to drive from, let's say, Mumbai to Delhi, wouldn't you need a map in front of you? For a typical Bharat series book, I take about 2 years from start to finish, around 9 months on the research, 3 months on the plotting, actually about around 6 months to write, another 3 months to rewrite, and of course the final few months on edits. I use spreadsheets for my plot to plan every twist and turn of the story. Of course, some writers may use other methods, index cards or Scrivener. Remember one thing, that we need to build conflict until the very end, and the best way of doing that is actually to plan the progression of the story. Create situations that are impossible and against all odds. Paint your characters into those impossible situations and then really figure out how to get them out of the corner that you've painted them into. Keep the plate spinning until the final paragraph and then of course let it fall. Remember one thing, writing many of the thriller type stories is pretty much like drawing a picture and then cutting it up into little bits that you offer to your audience one piece at a time, allowing the readers to piece that picture together by the end of the book. But never start writing your book until you have the entire picture in front of you. The great benefit of doing this, of course, is that you never have writer's block. Tip number 5, be a good rewriter. I must tell you, and I'm saying this absolutely honestly, I'm not a good writer, never have been. I depend on my editors to make my work feel professional. But I'm a fairly decent storyteller and I'm a fairly decent rewriter. It was Hawthorne who said that easy reading is damn hard writing. It is through multiple rewrites that you can make your material an easy read. All information conveyed to a reader should ideally be from the point of view of the main character. Remain in that scene with the character and tell the readers what that character is seeing, what he is thinking, and what she is feeling. When you want to use multiple characters, use different narratives like a third person versus a first person narrative to tell the story from different points of view. But most importantly, read your dialogue aloud. In order to hear the dialogues that you have written, do they sound real or do they sound forced? Ernest Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober. My personal view, write drunk, edit sober. Next, start your rewrite. That's the hangover. My 6th tip for you, remember the goldfish. Attention spans are declining rapidly. The average human attention span was 12 seconds in 2000, and by 2013 it was down to 8 seconds, which is a drop of 33%. And what's worse is the fact that the corresponding attention span for a goldfish was 9 seconds in that year, almost about 13% more than a human being. The honest to God truth is that the average book is only read up to page 18. Books are bought, but they aren't necessarily fully read. The hardest job of a writer is to get the reader to turn the page. It was the great Alfred Hitchcock who said that the duration of a movie is related to the endurance of the human bladder. So how do we make sure that a person doesn't get up, even in case the human bladder is giving way? We are, honestly speaking, competing for mind space. We have Netflix, Amazon, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. You'll have to figure out a way how to read your scenes repeatedly from the reader's point of view, because your greatest skill has to be in getting your reader to turn the page. Does your scene create fear, anger, thrill, surprise, or if not, it requires further work? It was Lee Child who said that the way to write a thriller is to ask a question at the beginning and answer it at the end. Well, suspense, frankly, just simply involves creating questions in the reader's mind. Questions that eventually get answered by the end. Play what I call the onion effect. Peel the layers off slowly. Reveal information gradually. The timing of information is important. Remember to balance surprise and suspense. An unfired bullet is infinitely more dangerous than one that has already been fired. Thrills are about anticipation more than actual action. Remember one thing, ultimately, your first page has to be a pothole. Someone falls into it and can't get out. Every chapter has to be a morsel, a self-contained morsel that has full flavor. Every chapter end has to be a catapult, which catapults the reader into the next chapter. And finally, your book conclusion should be a satisfying burp at the end of a meal, where you feel satisfied, you feel content, and most importantly, it makes your reader look out for your next book. The 7th tip, stick to the knitting. It was Somerset Maugham who said that there are 3 rules for writing the novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are. Well, that's partly true in the sense that, there is the entire view that writing is ultimately an art form. But the reality is that there are expectations of your reader in terms of the genre in which you are writing. So you have to stay true to the genre. Read as many books as you can within your genre in order to understand what are the reader expectations within that particular class of books. For example, A word count of a literary fiction novel could be easily over 150,000 words. But young adult fiction, for example, or a college romance would rarely be over 70,000 words. A typical Dan Brown thriller would be around 120,000 words, whereas a typical James Patterson thriller would be around 75,000 words. So the point is that you need to figure out which genre you're writing in. Tip number 8, amplify your characters. We need to build larger than life characters and amplify each one of their traits. Overemphasize those traits. Think of what a cartoonist does. They pick up the real life characteristics of a given individual and then they overemphasize the elements. And frankly, the most important part of your book is really the villain, because the villain is as important, if not more important, than the hero. The reader only likes the protagonist because the antagonist comes there in order to make things very, very difficult and challenging. Tip number 9, remember that you are work in process. My sort of writing is not an art, it's a craft. A carpenter who fashions children's toys will do a better job of the 100th piece in comparison to the very first that he does. So in that sense, art is about inspiration, but craft is about perspiration. Practice makes perfect. It was the author Steve Berry who said that, there's only one way to learn how to write, and that's to write. So don't worry about what others think about your writing. Undoubtedly take valid suggestions on board, but develop a thick skin when it comes to critics. If they could really write stories, then they wouldn't be writing reviews. Tip number 10 pretty much covers everything else. Don't lose the day job. It's damn difficult to write when you are hungry, and it'll be a while before royalties can sustain your life. The other piece of advice is that the old proverb that one should not judge a book by its cover is utter nonsense. Most readers do. Marketing is very important. No publisher will push your book as much as you will. If you invest 2 years in writing a book, then you can certainly afford to invest another 6 months in making it sell. Rejection is part of life. Anything in the creative space is Agni Pariksha or trial by fire. Around 47 literary agents and publishers rejected me before I eventually self-published and then got published. And finally, if you do attain success, remember that the words in your book are only through you, not from you. Keep your feet on the ground and thank Devi Saraswati.